Thank you so much, Judy, for that kind introduction. And let me say on behalf of President Obama, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, the entire administration, and all Americans, it is a great, great honor to host this year's World Habitat Day. I want to thank Mayor Fenty for welcoming World Habitat Day 2009, for this opportunity for the world to see the promise of America in the nation's capital. Let me also thank the working group who made this day possible, the Rockefeller Foundation, especially the wonderful and close friend that Judy Roden has become, to Habitat for Humanity, Jonathan, thank you, the National Building Museum, this spectacular, spectacular space here, and to our great friends at the Brookings Institution. Collectively, you remind us that leadership starts with listening and learning. I also want to thank my administration colleagues, Susan Rice, Melody Barnes, and Valerie Jarrett, who have dedicated themselves to this event and to this cause. Lastly, I want to thank the diplomatic community for coming together to make World Habitat Day a great success, particularly the United Nations and Dr. Anna Tibaijuka. Thank you. Whether it is her work to establish the African Ministerial Conference on Housing and Urban Development or putting urban poverty high on the agenda of multilateral institutions across the world, she is a pioneer. Thank you for your remarkable history of American planning that you just gave us. And I can only repeat that for those of you who know Judy Roden, the compliment that she is the Jane Jacobs of international development is quite simply the highest possible compliment that she could be given. Thank you, Dr. Tibaijuka, for your leadership. I also want to mention in particular Peter Oberlander, a founding father of UN Habitat, who we are posthumously awarding a World Habitat Day 2009 Scroll of Honor in this event today. We honor his memory and the lifetime he spent promoting socially and environmentally sustainable towns and cities around the world. We are thankful for this opportunity to demonstrate our national commitment to make socially and environmentally sustainable communities rooted in safe, decent, and affordable shelter a reality for families across the globe. Indeed, I'm proud not only to reinforce our longstanding relationship with UN Habitat, but to carry on a strong HUD tradition of leadership and involvement in World Habitat Day. My good friend and predecessor, Henry Cisneros, led the US delegation to the second World Habitat Conference in Istanbul in 1996. And recently, we partnered with the UN to organize 2 regional housing finance workshops in Africa. This year's World Habitat Day offers an opportunity to build on those efforts, to bring attention to some of the most promising sustainability ideas being explored across the globe. In so doing, we can create a platform for international partnership. We can embrace a greener, more prosperous future, and we can make the places every family calls home safer, more inclusive, and more sustainable. This year's theme, Planning for Our Urban Future, comes at a moment of both remarkable change and worrisome uncertainty, when the source of economic security for millions of families around the globe has been dangerously eroded. Home, the foundation upon which we build our lives, raise our children, and plan for our futures. At the same time, we face the largest wave of urban growth in human history. For the first time ever, more than half of our global population lives in metropolitan areas. By 2030, almost 5 billion people will live in urban areas. With each of these developments comes enormous challenges: to deliver healthcare services and safe drinking water, to provide reliable, energy-efficient transportation, and to build a solid foundation for economic growth that lifts all of our peoples. In the United States, where our largest 100 metro areas account for 65% of our population and 75% of our economic output, this trend is long underway. Our population is expected to grow by another 50% in the first half of this century. This at the same time we have wastewater systems over a century old, schools in dire need of repair, an inefficient transportation system, and a housing policy with too little emphasis on affordable rental housing solutions. While few have made the connection between the sustainability of our metropolitan areas and our recent economic crisis, if you look closely, you'll see that the neighborhoods facing the brunt of the crisis in this country, with the highest foreclosure rates and the deepest job losses, are often the least sustainable, with the worst access to transportation, the most troubled schools, and the least economic opportunity. So the challenges of this moment are clear: to build communities in the most holistic way possible, sustainably, so that we can meet the needs of today without compromising the futures of our children and our grandchildren. My country's commitment to sustainable growth is embodied by the words you just heard President Obama speak, who worked on the south side of Chicago as a community organizer and walked the dirt paths of Kibera slum of Kenya as a senator. And he has pursued a robust sustainability agenda as our president, rejecting the false choice between investing in clean energy and economic growth. He's instead championing a 21st century energy policy that will address the threat of climate change, reduce our dangerous dependence on oil, and at the same time create millions of new clean energy jobs. And with 20% of our carbon emissions in this country coming from residential buildings, we know that tackling climate change literally does start at home. So does opportunity, with low-income families spending 60% of their household budgets on housing and transportation combined. We also know that ensuring our homes are located near affordable transportation, good schools, and good jobs is equally important to drive down poverty at the same time that we reduce vehicle emissions. That's why, from creating a White House Office of Urban Affairs to asking me to renew HUD's commitment to urban policy, strong, sustainable, inclusive growth in America's communities is central to President Obama's vision for our country and one of the guiding principles of the Recovery Act. Dedicating some $16 billion to green building and retrofits, the Recovery Act is promoting energy efficiency in our homes and buildings, turning foreclosed homes into affordable housing, while also making investments in efficient transportation and developing a workforce ready to embrace a greener, more prosperous future. To build on these investments and seize this unique moment in our history, HUD has proposed a Sustainable Communities Initiative. HUD will partner for the first time with the Department of Transportation and the Environmental Protection Agency and make $140 million in our budget available to localities to better coordinate governmental efforts to integrate transportation, housing, and land use planning. For the first time, we will speak with one voice when it comes to supporting housing, environmental, and transportation innovations at the urban and metropolitan level. But as you know, we're by no means alone in America. We're seeing these critical linkages around the world, in places like Rizhao, China, where they have deployed green infrastructure to improve their quality of life and grow their economy. In Malmö, Sweden, where they've created green neighborhoods out of tenements and old shipyards, transforming an industrial recession into an opportunity to reshape the built environment and connect residents with more sustainable transportation choices and energy sources. Instead of expanding into the green space beyond their metropolitan areas, as we have done far too often in this country, they're recycling already developed land and infrastructure. Another opportunity for us to learn from our friends in the international community is the groundbreaking work done by Habitat for Humanity in partnership with governments around the world to rebuild from natural disasters. Just last week, President Obama announced the creation of an interagency recovery task force, which I will lead with our Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. One of our tasks will be to ensure that disaster response focuses on not just rebuilding what was there before, but rebuilding stronger and more sustainably. And nowhere will that be more important than helping these communities adapt to prepare for the long-term impacts of climate change. But sustainability isn't just about building communities that are environmentally sustainable. It's also about making them socially and economically sustainable, creating real opportunity and attacking the intense concentration of poverty in our inner cities. That's why we're engaging our partners on the ground in our cities to extend neighborhood transformation efforts beyond public housing. With our Choice Neighborhoods proposal, we're challenging communities to link these interventions more closely with school reform and early childhood interventions as we partner with Arne Duncan at the Department of Education in his work on the Promise Neighborhoods initiative, which is replicating the success of the Harlem Children's Zone in New York City. The same principle motivates each of these efforts. When you choose a home, you don't just choose a home. You also choose the schools that your child attends, you choose transportation to work, you choose a community. And in a country that has been a beacon of opportunity to immigrants around the world for centuries, it is this very principle that has made home a critical rung on the ladder to economic opportunity. The transformation we are witnessing in our cities, in our populations, is clearly one of the most pressing challenges facing the global community in the 21st century. Some of us may wonder, including many in this room and around the country, whether we can rise to meet that challenge. I believe that we can, because I believe my own eyes. Some of you might know that before HUD Secretary, as Judy said, I served as New York City's housing commissioner. But before that, I was a baseball fan, a big fan of the New York Yankees. And John, with all due respect to the Phillies, I'm still a big Yankees fan. More than 3 decades ago, I sat in Yankee Stadium during Game 2 of a World Series game against the Los Angeles Dodgers when Howard Cosell broadcast his famous words to millions of viewers across the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bronx is burning. Indeed, the South Bronx of the 1970s was nothing less than an urban catastrophe. Arson consumed thousands of buildings. The neighborhood surrounding Yankee Stadium lost 75% of its population in just 10 years. During the same decade, New York City as a whole lost more population than the entire city of Washington, D.C. Across New York, a sense of chaos bubbled close to the surface. Across the nation, many speculated that we were witnessing the death throes of the American city. And across the world, the South Bronx became a symbol of urban decline. In Buenos Aires, the city's most infamous public housing development was nicknamed Fort Apache, itself a nickname for the most notorious police precinct in the South Bronx, which had become stranded in a vanished neighborhood like a fort in the midst of a vast prairie of destruction. Today, it's hard to imagine that the now vibrant neighborhoods of the South Bronx were part of the war zone that Cosell described to the American people that October night more than 3 decades ago. Today, far from being focused on the potential death of the American city, New York is deeply engaged in figuring out how to cut carbon emissions by 30%, even as the city gains another 1 million people by the year 2030. And it's not just New York. Denver is breaking down traditional city-suburb tensions by linking downtown to surrounding communities with a new multimodal transit system and focusing construction and preservation of affordable housing at stops along the way. Like so many others, they are moving away from what Judy Rodin described as a 20th century view of cities and rural areas to a view of city and rural and suburban areas in tension to a new vision, 21st century vision of metropolitan prosperity, demonstrating that cities and suburbs not only share problems, but can collaborate on solutions as well. Americans don't pretend to have all the answers. Certainly, we have a long way to go to meet the high bar that we've set for ourselves, and that this year's Scroll of Honor winners have set for global engagement. But when we work in partnership, rooted in our most common values, our chances for success are that much greater. This is the spirit that will be guiding the World Urban Forum and HUD's delegation to Rio, which I look forward to leading next March. There, all of our partnerships will be examined and our best ideas put to the test. Working in common purpose, I have no doubt that we can and we will take advantage of this historic opportunity to shape a more sustainable, inclusive, and prosperous future for generations to come. That is our challenge today. Let us rise to meet it. Thank you. Thank you. And now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a champion for our world's homes and communities, someone who has used his international acclaim to impact lives at home in Philadelphia and across the world, Jon Bon Jovi, who I had the great pleasure of meeting back in April, who has worked so closely with our administration on the President's United We Serve initiative. Jon has also worked with Habitat for Humanity over the years and serves as the first founding ambassador for the Habitat for Humanity Ambassador Program, which raises international awareness for Habitat's affordable housing work across the globe. He saw the incredible housing need on Louisiana's Gulf Coast following Hurricane Katrina and donated $1 million to build 28 homes for low-income families on the hurricane-stricken coast. In neighborhoods that HUD invests in, Jon is there to build upon our investments. Let me give you just two examples. Several years ago, the Jon Bon Jovi Soul Foundation joined forces with Sister Mary Scullion's Project Home, a HUD grantee, to create the Jon Bon Jovi Homes, 15 rehabbed houses providing a place to call home for homeless women in North Philadelphia. This year, Jon and HUD grantees Project Home and the Bethesda Project announced plans for the construction of a new building that will house nearly 80 homeless and formerly homeless men and women in Philadelphia and connect residents to transportation and other supportive services. From Newark to Los Angeles to Detroit to Atlanta, Jon and his foundation have forged unprecedented public-private partnerships around affordable housing, making powerful connections with local residents in the neighborhoods that his work touches. Jon is with us today because he understands that our homes are the foundation upon which we build our lives and knows that we all have a role to play in ensuring that global citizens, regardless of where they live or their station in life, deserve the high quality of life and economic opportunities that we all wish for our children and our grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jon Bon Jovi.
We weren't born